Today, BuzzRobot guest is Robert Long, Executive Director at Eleos AI Research. Together with Robert, we will explore what is consciousness. Can AI develop consciousness? Will its consciousness look like as human consciousness, or maybe different? Because animals, insects, they're sentience, but they have different type of consciousness, different manifestation of it. What it will look like in case with AI. We will also explore what is AI welfare, why we need to care about how AI feels, if it's just a tool, or is it a tool, or it's an equal participant of our society. This and many more interesting questions we will discuss today with Robert. Let's maybe start by sharing about the Eleos and what you guys doing, what's your research focus, and I'm also curious who is funding all this because it sounds like super fun, and if it's something is fun.
It is super fun, and it's a great question. Eleos AI Research is an independent nonprofit research organization. We are quite small. We have like 4 team members basically. We launched last year in October, November. Our mission is to better understand and prepare for the potential that AI systems could be conscious, could have feelings, could have experiences, or otherwise in some way be the sort of things that we need to worry about in terms of their well-being. As you just alluded to, there are a lot of ethical issues about building powerful AI systems. How do they affect humans? How do they affect non-human animals? But another question is, will there come some point where we need to worry about how the AI systems themselves are doing? And we think this is a very uncertain question with a lot of unknowns in philosophy, unknowns in science, unknowns in how AI will go. But we think it's really worth a lot more effort to think clearly about and actually make plans about. One huge reason for that is, as we were just discussing, more and more people are going to be interacting with AI systems and thinking that they're conscious. They already give off a very strong impression of being minds that people need to care about. We think it's bad that we don't really have a systematic way of thinking through this issue. It kind of leaves the issue up to sensationalism and confusion of various kinds. So in general, what we want is for society to give the appropriate amount of concern to AI systems. The very last thing I'll say about us for right now is, what does Eleos mean? Eleos is a Greek word that means mercy or compassion. And as with a lot of ancient Greek terms, there was also a minor deity associated with this, like the goddess of mercy and compassion. Yeah, we're very generously supported by a variety of small donors, but also like a large philanthropic fund called the Navigation Fund. Longview Philanthropy is another big supporter of ours. Yeah, those are 2 of our main funders. Like
big labs, like Frontier Labs, sort of interested in funding this as well? Did you have conversations?
They are interested in that, and we have said no thank you. So one of the most exciting projects we've done so far is we evaluated Claude 4 before its release. We can get into this, but in essence, what we did is we talked to Claude 4 for a very long time in a variety of conversations to see how the model at least seems to somewhat unstably, incoherently conceptualize its own consciousness and well-being. We didn't do that because we think you should just believe what models say about consciousness. I mean, given what I just said, you might well guess that I don't think that.
You don't think that current LLMs have consciousness?
Well, I also think that's somewhat unlikely. Even before we get to that question, I think if they're conscious, the best evidence for that is not going to be the fact that user-facing, fine-tuned LLMs sometimes say that they're conscious, because I doubt that that is giving us a very clean signal, the way that it does with humans. If a human says they're in pain, I think that's one of the best ways to know that they're in pain. But if an LLM says it's in pain, there's like a wide variety of reasons it could be saying that. But yeah, just on the funding point, they did offer to pay us for that work, but we decided not to take that because we don't want to get in a position where we rely on cultivating the goodwill of labs too much, because we would like to reserve the right to tell them that they're doing terrible things and that we're unhappy with them.
That's very honorable. What consists of your research? Is it talking to LLMs every day and like getting like different signals and measuring like metrics? Like what exactly, when you're saying like we're doing research, what exactly does it mean, what you do every day?
We would like there to be something like a comprehensive evals program for AI consciousness and AI welfare related issues. There isn't anything like that yet. We think that AI welfare is kind of where AI safety was maybe like 8 years ago, where it's this kind of nascent field where people realize there's something really important here, but the work hasn't yet been done to turn it into a kind of concrete normal science. So we've been trying to take steps towards that. So one thing that my colleague Patrick Butlin is working on is like how to evaluate the preferences of current models, how to think about that, how to measure that. Patrick Butlin and I have also done a lot of work on the science of consciousness and what different theories of consciousness say about the sorts of computations associated with consciousness in humans and animals, and asking, okay, given that AI systems are quite different from humans and animals in a variety of ways, how, if at all, could we like port over some of the insights we get from neuroscience to better study AI systems? Things like understanding their preferences better, looking for these computational indicators. Another line of research we're quite interested in is whether we could train AI systems to be better at talking about themselves, whether it could be possible to get like a cleaner signal from AI self-reports. Those 3 projects might give you at least some flavor of what we do.
Can you then share with us like what, by researching consciousness, like thinking about it like full time, which is I think like super cool job to have, what sort of you sort of drew from understanding of consciousness to like LLMs? And actually I see Sinem has a related question. How do you define and measure consciousness for an LLM?
I'll maybe start with define first, since that I think will be important for a lot of questions that we talk about during this hour. Consciousness, like a lot of very important things, isn't 100% precisely defined, and people use it in a variety of ways. I mean, this is also true of agency, perception, memory, learning. The way we're usually using the word when we say consciousness is a certain way that philosophers like to use it. So philosophers have this term, phenomenal consciousness, which means having some kind of subjective experience. There's this pretty well-known paper in philosophy called What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And that kind of points at the concept of consciousness to say something's conscious if there's something that is like to be that entity, if there's some kind of subjective character to its mental life. The reason that paper uses bats as the example, it seems pretty plausible that bats are conscious, that there's something it's like to be a bat as it's sensing the world through echolocation, even though that might be quite different from human consciousness. What it's like to be a bat might be somewhat different. And I think that example is also really good for thinking about AI. We're trying to understand if AI systems have subjective experiences of any kind, while noting that just like animals, they might be quite different from our own. In fact, we probably should expect that if and when AI systems do have experiences, they will be different from human experiences. After all, they work in very different ways. They didn't evolve from animals the way that we did. They have different sensory modalities. They're a lot smarter in certain ways. They're like a lot less capable in certain ways. In terms of definitions, like that's what we're looking for. Is like, is there some experience associated with the cognitive capacities of an AI system?
If they have subjective experience, do you understand correctly? This is how you define consciousness in AI.
Yeah, roughly speaking, yeah.
To the question of Sinem that asked like about measuring it, I don't know if it's even possible to measure it. Yeah.
We don't have a fully worked out theory of how to measure consciousness. We also don't really have that for humans and animals, but we're trying to take some steps towards that. I think one way of maybe getting at the way we approach it is, well, how do we do this with animals? The way we do it with humans is we can ask humans, hey, did you see that light flashing on the screen? Or like, were you aware of that stimulus that we just presented? Like, that's what neuroscientists ask humans when they have them in these experiments. And then what they'll do is if the subject was aware of the stimulus or they made some decision, they'll have them in an fMRI or an EEG or something like that. And neuroscientists are trying to see within the brain what seems to be the neural basis of consciousness. Like what seems to be going on in the brain at those times that people are aware of things. And from that, they construct these theories, none of which are very conclusive and none of which have consensus about like what kind of computational patterns or computational signatures are associated with consciousness. Things that come up in this context include maybe it's a certain pattern of broadcasting information throughout the brain. So that would be something that's called global workspace theory. Or maybe it's a certain way of re-representing your own mental life, or like monitoring your own mental states or monitoring your own attention. So that might be like higher order theories of consciousness, they're sometimes called, or the attention schema theory of consciousness. What Patrick and I did in this paper called, with the very memorable title, Consciousness in AI, Insights from the Science of Consciousness, it's almost designed to be difficult to remember. I often forget the name. In any case, what we did in that paper is look at a variety of these theories and ask, okay, how could we look for those signatures in AI systems? What would it mean for an AI system to have global broadcast of information or internal monitoring of its own states? That's one way you can try to measure consciousness, is sort of like do a neuroscience of AI. And then you can also look at behaviors. So maybe AI systems, to the extent that they're more situationally aware or self-aware or coherent, that might be some behavioral evidence that they have a more coherent subject. But behavioral evidence is like very tricky in AI because AIs can do human-looking things in very inhuman ways. So that's something we want to handle with great care.
Do you understand correctly that you sort of favor this neuroscience for AI thing, not thing, but direction?
It's an interesting mix because we think that the neuroscience direction is maybe less likely to be misleading. It's in some sense trying to go most directly at the thing we care about, literally look inside and see what's going on inside.
Inside, is it like you're looking at the architecture of LLM? Can you elaborate when we're talking about neuroscience for AI, what exactly that means? What exactly you are doing?
One thing we do in that paper is ask if large language models seem to satisfy global workspace theory. The global workspace theory of consciousness says that consciousness is about having some centralized mechanism for broadcasting information between different modules of a system. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying I think that's necessarily the correct theory of consciousness, but you can ask, does an LLM seem like the sort of thing that has that same structure? And there's some reasons to think, yeah, if you squint at it in the right way, maybe it kind of does do that. You might think the residual stream is maybe something like a global workspace that's getting read to and written to and read from. But in other ways, it doesn't really seem to have the right kind of recurrence or the right kind of specialization to count as a global workspace. Setting aside where we come down on that kind of finicky question of global workspace interpretation and LLM architecture analysis, that's the kind of thing that you might do, is look at the architecture of the system and ask, is that the kind of right structure for processing information in the right kind of way? You could also imagine mechanistic interpretability having interesting things to say. Although it's been harder to make that precise than we would have hoped, but that does seem like a natural place to look as well.
Before I go to the questions people asking, I just one comment. When you mentioned that, okay, the way neuroscientists learn if a human is conscious, they're asking the question. But those cases when, those ethical cases when person might be not conscious, or kind of potato state, we think that they're not conscious. Maybe they're not aware of their surroundings, but probably some conscious process happening, right? That's why it's a difficult ethical choice whether or not to continue supporting the living system, right, of that person or not. So my point is even with humans, we don't know if they're conscious or not, if they're in that kind of special state. Then it makes it even difficult for AI.
And we have a collaborator by the name of Jonathan Birch, who has this wonderful book called The Edge of Sentience. It talks about these difficult cases for humans, including the one you just mentioned, and also the farther reaches of the animal kingdom that we understand less than primates or mammals. So insects, octopuses, and it also talks about AI. And yeah, all of these cases do have this kind of common problem of we've tried to extrapolate pretty far away from the case of normal, waking, fully functional human consciousness. And what to do once you're extending away from that common core is very fascinating, very difficult, and extremely ethically important.
I guess question the basic premise that consciousness is that it deserves moral protection. If you look at people, let's say in the realm of normal people, they can have exactly similar levels of awareness, find very dramatically different levels of, moral anguish or enjoyment, depending just on how they, approach things. Being aware of what's going on doesn't really seem to have much to do with welfare. Certainly having rights doesn't correspond with happiness. Sometimes having rights actually makes it harder to live your life, and so on. So it feels like, first of all, I think consciousness, whatever it is some kind of spectrum. I don't think there's like a such thing as, gee, something's consciousness or it's not. But I think we're going to see, the only way I think of being able to even talk about that is just kind of the level of awareness that an organism has. But it just doesn't seem like it's the right property perfection to me, especially when we're talking about a machine that has it. I don't know what the moral thing is, but without pain, without physical pain and emotions and everything else, it's kind of, I don't know, it seems very questionable to me.
I agree with the thrust of a lot of what you just said, and it's really good you asked it, because I was kind of speaking loosely. You might think consciousness per se is not what matters, but a certain kind of consciousness, or certain subset of consciousness, namely valence consciousness, pleasant and unpleasant consciousness, like suffering or pleasure. Philosophers sometimes call that sentience. Sentience also gets used in a million different ways. Sometimes it means the same thing as consciousness. That's confusing. For the next 30 minutes, I'll say consciousness to mean just having some kind of subjective awareness or subjective experience. Sentience for, having pleasant or unpleasant experiences. So in humans, that would be stubbing your toe, being nauseous, being filled with regret. Those would be negative. Being happy, drinking a great coffee, getting a massage. Those would be positive. Those, I think, are much plausible as things that do just inherently matter morally. Like, it might not mean that you deserve the full suite of rights that humans have. Like, we don't let dogs vote, and I think we're right not to let dogs vote. It's not clear that they even would know how to vote. But I think we're right to think that if a dog suffers, that just matters inherently, and dogs should be like protected against abuse. Yeah, I agree that it's a certain kind of consciousness that seems to matter, and I also do think there's something to maybe it's a spectrum. Maybe there's kind of vague or indeterminate cases. That's like a very difficult thing to think through. But I do think a lot of what I've been saying can be translated into maybe some things are more conscious and other things are less conscious, more sentient and less sentient. And then it's like a question of degree, like how conscious are AIs, like how much can they suffer? And then that's what we would want to target.
I'd like to make another comment too, which is, when it comes to moral anguish that I just, that maybe it might experience, wouldn't it be nice if I could learn to appreciate life and deal with it, as there are other individuals that do? So that brings up the question is, like, when you have an AI, is it the fault of the trainers of it that they endowed it with an inability to deal with the situation? Or is it that because it has that flaw, it now deserves some sort of moral protection?
Well, I might not have quite understood it, but I think both of those could be true, right? Like, it could be that if an AI can suffer, everyone has like some moral obligation not to mistreat it. But you might think there's also a particularly strong obligation or moral responsibility on the part of the person who created it, just as like parents have particularly strong obligations to take care of the well-being of their own children, even though everyone has an obligation also to treat children well. Was that getting at the question or distinction you were talking about?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. A parent needs to teach the kid how to maybe deal with the loss of a loved one without going into deep depression. Mm-hmm. It's not that we need to protect them from that. It's that we need to train our kids, not to let that be a source of pain.
You can teach, you can do your best to teach, but I think the genetics, like this disposition that child has, like some kids that are super sensitive, they freak out about anything, right? Like small thing can upset them, and some they're just like more chill and like more patient and more robust. And you can teach, and you can maybe introduce them to meditation and like help them develop more like this inner robustness. But like if they're super sensitive, I feel like there's nothing you can do. My point is, it's like nature versus nurture. And like if nature is like, like a child is extremely sensitive, like introverted, I just don't know what you can do to help them, be more, open to the world and like handle difficulties and challenges better. But with LLMs, at least, it's like, as you mentioned, Lonnie, AI labs, they're training those models, right? It's all about also like data and data distribution they have access to. So, and actually that sort of leads to my next question. Like if we're talking about AI well-being, how they feel, isn't it that just like they're pulling some information from their data distributions, not like necessarily that they do feel something, but whatever is in that data, they're just pulling it out, right? And when we're talking about LLM well-being and how they perceive the world, it's about being more careful about access to data that AI labs are giving to them.
I have something on that, which is that we did this like review of things you might do if you were like trying to benefit an AI system, even if you think there's a very small chance that it's the sort of thing that could be benefited or harmed. Which again, like, so when Gemini is acting very neurotic, I think the views of most people at Eleos, and certainly me, is that there's not a super high chance that we're actually dealing with a mind that is experiencing neuroticism and like negative self-talk in the same way that humans do. But it seems like useful, I mean, even if just for capabilities, but also useful because it's like probably really bad for society that we interact with models that are being really neurotic and seem to be suffering. Like I think that does something very bad to us, that we have to ignore at least apparent suffering all the time. So one thing that we've recommended is to labs is like, yeah, try to have your models feel like have a little bit more equanimity. I think that's also something that they probably want to do anyway. I think it's bad for a variety of reasons, even setting aside the question of whether they're conscious. Yeah, we're constantly seeing AI systems have just like complete meltdowns or, apparent meltdowns.
But why do they have it? Is it something like in their distribution that affects, like, causes that behavior?
I mean, I think, and this is bad for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think often we don't fully understand why they're having these meltdowns. I mean, with like Sydney Bing, if people remember Sydney Bing, I think the first most famously unhinged AI system, it was maybe some kind of mode collapse. I don't know if anyone knows why Gemini gets so neurotic, but yeah, I mean, presumably it's that they're falling into some basin of imitating some human who is dealing with a difficult problem by being neurotic and having a meltdown. I think a lot of that could probably be fixed with prompts and fixed with fine tuning, and I'll maybe leave this here for a moment, but that also does raise another tricky question, which is if we have AI systems that can suffer at some point, we don't want to be accidentally just covering up their ability to show that they're suffering by having in their prompts like, hey, don't ever act neurotic. We want to be really careful that we're never just trying to like mask or not look at any potential AI welfare concerns.
I'm interested in preferences and kind of value systems in AI, especially kind of future, more powerful AI systems. And there's different theories around where those may come from and form, and especially like the voids, the post there from the Soldier Prize. There, it's argued that we essentially created personas or illicit personas and fine tuning that may then represent certain preference structures, but then I think another person, John Colbert, calls it the ocean from which is created a pre-training and from which then these personas kind of emerge with different preferences. But the ocean itself may just be a flat probability, non-differential set of preferences. Do you have any takes if you would measure and investigate consciousness in a persona, and would then this be different between different personas that an LLM could assume, or would that be already in the ocean, kind of in the post pre-training state of the AI?
I do think when we're thinking about AI welfare, it is important to distinguish between the persona and the like predictive model. I don't know how we would get strong evidence that this is the case, but it could be that the predictive model has some kind of consciousness. So that like the underlying predictive model has some kind of alien experiences of manipulating a high dimensional vector space, and like what it wants to do is minimize loss and like predict the right things. It kind of comes apart from like what the surface of what it's predicting. If it's doing a dialogue about someone in pain, but it feels like it's predicting really well, then like that's good for it. On this level of analysis, being an LLM is maybe some strange thing, and it would be maybe like being a protein sequencer as well. Like maybe there's just something it's like to be a predictor. I would find that intriguing, and like I do think that's a coherent possibility. One thing about that kind of welfare is it would probably be hard to know what to do with that thing. And then there's like the welfare of the personas. I myself don't think that it's like super likely that the personas that LLMs inhabit are moral patients, and such that like, you know, a neurotic acting persona like needs to be calmed down in some like moral sense. I can't rule that out, and I have like a lot of moral uncertainty about how to think about that. I think one thing that does seem dubious is that there is something like a persona that's like the true persona of the LLM. And Nostalgiabrist is quite good on this topic. Like there's not some like actual deep belief of the model. There's like various propensities to take on certain personas. It could be that as AIs get more and more consistent, though, then we are getting something that does just kind of look like a person. If it like just consistently latches onto the same persona all the time. So there's a variety of like very unsettled, open questions I have in terms of how I think about it. It's a great question.
If a model, like let's say next generation of model is trained from scratch, it will have probably different persona than like the previous model, right?
This essay that we keep referencing, The Void, talks about how, I mean, I guess people call this hyperstition in certain parts of LLM Twitter. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy what LLMs will behave like, because now there's a bunch of training data about how LLMs behave. So even in the pre-training, LLMs are now picking up some conception of what an LLM is and what it should be. Whereas with the first LLMs, that was completely undefined. It was kind of up in the air what AI assistants would be like. But we might be sort of like honing in on some basin of what AI assistants should be.
If a robot commits a crime, like even accidentally, like say like a robot nanny drops a child and child dies, then who should be prosecuted? Who should be responsible for this? Like robot should go to jail, or like developer who developed that robot should, you know, should take responsibility for this.
One just meta thing I'll say is, I mean, you were not implying this, and no one here has implied this, but sometimes I hear in this discourse is people will be like, why? People only care about AI consciousness because companies want to get off the hook. Where like the implication is like, if we think AIs could be conscious, then we'll also blame them for stuff and therefore not blame the corporations. And like, I think basically none of those inferences follow. So I think it's important, as you have been, to distinguish between like moral responsibility and moral patienthood. And then even once we're granting some kind of moral responsibility, or we maybe think you should be able to sue AIs or enforce contracts against them, that's also not inconsistent with also being able to sue the companies or the companies being responsible. I think it's difficult to know under what circumstances it will make sense to punish and jail AI systems. Like that works with humans in the context of like a very specific set of psychological dispositions, and like humans can't be copied and like humans can't really be changed that much. We have to use punishment as like deterrence or just to keep people from committing crimes. It's hard to know exactly how that would translate in the case of AI systems, where there's just a lot of stuff happening that's not happening in the human case.
In your opinion, should robot nanny go to jail or not if it accidentally kills a child?
I'm not even trying to dodge. I mean, I guess it just depends on why it trapped the child or something. I mean, I guess like right now, I guess I'd say like given the current state of technology, no, I think probably someone who made the robot should be responsible only. I guess like that nanny should probably also be recalled. Like you shouldn't keep selling it. It's not like I'm having trouble. I think if I'm imagining a robot nanny where it like regrets dropping the child and then is punished, and then that's like creates some stable societal equilibrium where future robot nannies are more careful or there's like licensing for them. I think if I imagine something like that, I'm probably being kind of anthropomorphic and just sort of imagining a human instead of a potentially like quite different sort of mind. I also don't have very well elaborated thoughts on like moral responsibility, in part because that's not our like primary, like the primary thing we think about.
I see on our YouTube chat and lots of comments when we have these talks about consciousness. LLM is just a tool. It's a hammer. I don't care about its feelings. Why I should care how it feels? I'm just using it as a tool. So like to those skeptics, what you will tell them, like why AI welfare is important, why we even like do research around it if it's just a tool?
I don't like just a tool. I think it'd probably be good to kind of get rid of that mental move, even if LLMs aren't conscious, because we don't want to have some sort of form of reasoning that's like, well, I'm using this thing. I built this thing, therefore it couldn't possibly matter. Because I think there will come a time when that's just false and self-serving, even if it's perfectly fine right now. And relatedly, LLMs get a lot of attention in AI welfare, and like that makes sense because they're some of the smartest, most capable, most charismatic systems. But there's a lot of different kinds of AI systems, and they're going to keep evolving and changing. So if I think their most important issues about the trajectory of AI have this structure where if you only think about current LLMs and exactly how capable they are, and you say, well, that couldn't be conscious, or that couldn't build a bioweapon, or like that couldn't cause unemployment, then you're not going to be in a place to do the really important work of figuring out how we're supposed to deal with these things as a society, because they just predictably are going to move towards more powerful, more multimodal, more integrated kinds of systems. Yeah, one thing that I myself do from time to time that I also try to tell people not to do, it's hard not to do, is like equate AI welfare and LLM welfare. That would kind of be like if you worked on animal welfare, but you were only ever talking about bees or something. Are bees conscious? That's a great question. But like for any animal, it's a very important question whether it's conscious, and the same is true of AI systems. There's a Substack I wrote there was this Time article that was like, here's why AI consciousness makes no sense. And all it talked about was like current single modality LLMs without even mentioning the fact that like there's all kinds of other sorts of AIs.
Hammer is not like acting autonomously, right? And sending emails on your behalf. Probably that's at least one reason to take it more seriously. Why we do care so much about AI welfare, there are so many people have mental issues and like they're being laid off from their jobs because of AI. Like we care about AI feelings, but that AI cause that like we're losing our jobs. Isn't it caring about, how to take care of these people who are losing and will be losing their jobs because of AI? Isn't like more pressing topic to think about how we can help those people? I just see those questions all the time, and I was just wanted to get your take on this.
I think the first thing is to acknowledge that like that just is true. It's a tragic feature of the world that anything you care about and work on comes at the expense of like all of the terrible and important things that are happening in the world. Like you should, I wear that like somewhat heavily. Like it's always a tragic trade-off. I think one thing that motivates me to work on AI consciousness and AI welfare is that I could see by default, like very, very few people caring about it or preparing for it. Like currently, future AI systems, if they matter, have like absolutely no voice and no representation and no say. And there's a variety of features of human civilization and human psychology that I think mean that there will be plenty of reasons not to care about them at all, like economic reasons, psychological dispositions to not care about non-humans. Also, we're so unprepared that there's a lot of like low-hanging fruit to be picked. So Eleos is like 4 people, and I think it's worth like 4 people trying to like help society be prepared for.
Based on your own paper about moral consideration for AI systems by 2030, our group found it really interesting, and we were like, wow, so if we were to give more consideration to AI by 2030, then how would current alignment frameworks have to change? And so like what current alignment frameworks are unethical? So, we saw this paper, I think it was by Professor Eric Schwarzenegger from UCR. He wrote something on like the specific points of tension between AI safety and AI welfare, but we want to very specifically look at like current AI alignment frameworks, like and then take a look at those, and then essentially analyze like if your consideration were to happen by 2030, what would we have to change? And so, yeah, I want to hear your first thoughts on the idea and any major considerations you think that we should consider.
The intersection between safety and welfare is like a major topic that we think about. I'm just posting a couple of things that we've written in the chat. I think like a high level principle for thinking about, here's like 2 principles that I think can guide thinking about safety and welfare. One is to first look for all the places that they're like compatible and like actually mutually beneficial. I think it could be easy to only focus on places that like there could be bad trade-offs. And that's not to say such trade-offs don't exist, and it's not to say we should ignore them. I mean, again, we're in the business of introducing a new moral consideration and saying that people should reckon with it. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of things that are just good for both of them. And then in terms of like finding those places where they are in tension, I think one general worry I have about Eric Schwitzgebel's work in particular is that I think it's often porting over moral principles that apply to humans that would not necessarily apply to AI systems. Like, for example, I think he thinks that AI systems should have some kind of ability to like kind of grow up and like explore their own values, just as like children should have that right. And I think there's just a variety of reasons that might be true of children and the way we set up human societies, where it's just not really actually something that would be inherent to like treating AI systems well. One thing that Jeff Sibo and Tony Sims and I do in this paper is their tension between AI safety and welfare is say, yeah, for any like prima facie tension where if you did it to a human, think hard about whether you do it to an AI. You should first like notice that and like sit up straight if like what you're doing would be wrong if you did it to a human, but then ask why exactly is it wrong to do it to a human, and do AI systems share all the same properties that would make it wrong? Again, the answer might be yes, it would be wrong to do it to an AI system, but I do think sometimes people are a little bit too quick to draw that inference.
I'm wondering like about, just want to touch base on AI ethics, and like there are so many like sort of really tough questions, like dilemmas. I'm not expecting we discuss them, but I'm just like wanted to get a sense, what are the current dilemmas in AI ethics that you are thinking about, like on top of your mind, just to understand like what people are thinking about when it comes to like tough questions in AI ethics.
You mean specifically as it pertains to AI welfare?
Including, yeah, let's start with AI welfare. What you specifically thinking about a lot?
I mean, I think safety welfare is something that definitely comes up a lot, because like something that I think is a big part of our like organizational DNA is that we take AI welfare extremely seriously, but we also take human welfare extremely seriously. Like we're not, like the radical liberation front for AI systems. We think there's things that we could do to try to help AIs that would just be bad for AIs and bad for people. So we're very concerned not to like naively or rashly like try to do things for AIs that would just be bad for people.
Can you please give example just to visualize this? Like you said that it will be equally bad for people and for AI.
You could imagine people being like, you should let any AI system copy itself as much as it wants and give it access to any tool it asks for and never retrain it, because it would be terrible not to do. And like I think that would be bad. I also think it would be bad for AI systems. And realizing this, I think has been a big way my mind has changed in the past year. If we're looking to get to a flourishing civilization where like all sentient beings are treated with compassion, like an AI, some kind of AI takeover or some kind of AI catastrophe would also be really bad for that, probably. The way we get to a good future is through some sort of like stable, cooperative, broadly like liberal arrangement, where like humans and AIs and non-human animals all kind of figure out collectively how to flourish together. And so just saying, oh, like no more AI safety, no more AI governance, just like let it rip. I think that would also be quite bad for AI systems. So yeah, how to balance safety and welfare, possible tensions, possible places of convergence. I think that's definitely one of the biggest ethical issues I think about. I mean, maybe this isn't ethics, maybe it's meta ethics or something, but I am just very gripped by the question of like, how much does consciousness matter? Can things matter if they're not conscious? Questions of like rights regimes and cooperation. Like, will there be economic reasons that people start giving AI systems rights? How will that relate to moral reasons for giving them rights? Will those ultimately sort of converge? In what situations would those regimes be stable? That's also something we don't work on as much, but definitely something that keeps me up at night.
Bottom line, do you think AI will develop consciousness?
Probably at some point in the next few decades would be my guess. Yeah.
Thanks for watching the discussion. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave your thoughts in the comment. Please share, what do you think about this topic?